Howdy folks, today we're going to be making a dish called moussaka. Now, many Americans aren't familiar with this dish. Those who are often associate it with Greece and Greek cuisine, and indeed, moussaka is something you find in Greek cuisine, but its origins are actually in the Middle East. And in fact, the name of the dish comes from the Arabic word moussaka, which means chilled. And so even though we do some cooking in this dish, it's commonly served lukewarm or at room temperature or even chilled. Although you can serve it hot if you want. It's delicious any way you want to go. The dish is common throughout the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, and it's something that is quite tasty, and I hope you'll try it. The first step is to get some eggplant, because it is a dish that involves eggplant, and I've got some eggplant here. I've cut it up into fairly small pieces, and the first thing to do is saute it. So I'm just going to pour some olive oil over my eggplant here, and then I also am going to add just a few spices. Real quickly, I'm going to add some black pepper. There we are. And then I'm going to add a bit of garlic powder so that this will get the flavor throughout the eggplant here while I saute it. I'm also, before I forget, actually technically the first step is I'm going to turn the oven on so it can be preheating. I'm going to turn it to about 450, and then I'm going to saute my eggplant. Okay, and we're just about done sauteing the eggplant. I added some more oil, and as you can see, it's changed color and texture. It's been absorbing the olive oil, and it's getting softer, and it's just about done. And we've been sauteing it for just a few moments over high heat, because that's what the definition of saute is, to briefly fry something over high heat. And once we have it done, we're going to put it in a dish, which is what I'm going to do right now. All right, I've transferred the sauteed eggplant into the bottom of this glass baking dish, and you can use whatever kind of dish you want, but one of the ways that moussaka is often prepared is in layers, and I thought this would let you see the layers a little more easily, especially once we've cooked it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some ground beef, and we're just going to spread that over the eggplant, and this will be our second layer. Sometimes in different forms of moussaka, you'll have other meats here besides beef. You might, for example, encounter lamb or pork, but beef is one of the meats that's commonly used. And once we have a layer of that, I'm going to put in some diced onions. There we are. Spread those around a little bit. And I'm going to also add some spices to work their way down into the beef. And one of the things I'm going to add, I used garlic earlier with the eggplant, and I'm also going to use some onion powder, which will distribute the taste a little more evenly than the chopped onions or diced onions here. And then I'm going to use two spices that are very common in Middle Eastern cuisine, and they're ones that Jesus mentions in the Gospels. He talks to the Pharisees about how they tithe a tenth of their dill, which I'm not going to use, and their mint, and I've got some mint flakes here, and I just love mint. So I'm going to sprinkle it liberally with mint flakes. And he also talks to them about how they tithe a tenth of their cumin. And so we're going to use cumin as well. And this is one of the things that gives a lot of Middle Eastern foods its distinctive flavor. There we are. At this point, I'm going to add a layer of tomato sauce. And that's another very common ingredient in moussakas. Normally I use pizza sauce, but this time I'm going to use tomato sauce. The pizza sauce that I use is quite low in carb. It's only about 4 grams of carb per serving. This is only 3 grams of carb. You have to watch your tomato sauce because a lot of times they're adding sugar to it or corn syrup. But this is one that is only 3 digestible grams of carb, and it's got a little bit of fiber in it, so that's nice too. But I thought it'd be nice to use it just for a change. It also has a kind of tartness compared to the pizza sauce, which has more of a tang. I don't know if I can explain that much better, but we don't have a really good taste vocabulary since we're primarily visual creatures. In any event, this has 3 grams of carb for a quarter cup, and I'm adding, I would guess, about a half cup here, and I want to be able to spread it around on top of the meat. So that would be about 6 grams of carb. I think actually I haven't quite added that much yet, so I'm going to add a little more. There we are. And once I have the layer of tomato sauce in place, I'm going to put on another layer because, as I said, this is very commonly a layered dish. The next layer, and this is something that there are different forms of, but it's common, especially in Greek versions of moussaka, to have a layer of white sauce. And there are lots of different ways you can make white sauce. One of the ways, and this is the way I did it, I decided to take sour cream and dilute it slightly with water so it would drip better and flow better and be easier to smooth over the surface. So I took 3 large tablespoons of sour cream and mixed them with a small amount of water and stirred it till I got a nice creamy consistency. And so we're going to pour that over the surface. Okay, and I'm going to try not to waste any of it. It's got it on the sides here, so I'm going to just spoon that all down. Okay, and this will also add a nice kind of tartness to it with the taste of the sour cream. Sour cream is also, and things like sour cream, like a kind of, it's sort of a, well, it's kind of like yogurt. It's also kind of like cheese, but it's called labneh, and it's a sour, it's also called kefir, and it's used in cuisine from different parts of the world. It's somewhat like sour cream. So, once we have that layer on, I'm then going to top it with something that is quite Greek, and that is feta cheese. And normally I tell you go for the full fat versions of things because the lower fat versions typically have more carbs, but not in this case. At least in the case of this product, the reduced fat version actually has fewer carbs. So I'm going to sprinkle this over the top. So add a very nice Greek taste to this. And I'm just using this small container. I'm going to use all of it to get a nice top. It won't completely cover everything, but that's okay. Okay, and once I've got that done, then it's time to bake. Okay, I've had the moussaka in the oven for about 15 minutes at 450 degrees, and I'm going to take it out now and show you what it looks like. Here we come. Now, as you can see, we've had our cheese on top, the feta has merged together, and it's also begun to change color a little bit. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there's a little bit there. If I'd left it in a little longer, it'd get darker. But we've also had our different layers bubbling together and mixing, and so that'll distribute the flavors very nicely. And what we're going to do now is let it cool down enough to where it can be eaten. This whole pan, as I've prepared it, has about 17 grams of carbs. So how much you'd get per serving would depend on how you slice it once it cools down. I'm probably going to slice this 3 times, which will give me 4 pieces, and at that rate each serving would be about 4 grams of digestible carb per serving, which is really awesome. So it's good from a low carb perspective. Now, you can prepare it other ways. There are many different ways it's prepared. You can use your own spices. You could use a different kind of white sauce. You might use Alfredo sauce, which can be gotten with very low carbs, just 1 or 2 grams of carb per serving even. So that's a possibility you might want to explore.